Hello, you've tuned to this week's episode of Next Steps Forward, and I'm your host, Chris Meek. As always, it's an honor to have you with us. Next Steps Forward is committed to helping others achieve more than ever while experiencing greater personal empowerment and well being. Our guest today is Donna Rice Hughes. Donna has 30 years of leadership as a social entrepreneur, internet safety expert, author, speaker, commentator, and producer. She's the president and CEO of Enough is Enough, a nonpartisan organization that has led the fight to make the internet safer for children and families since 1994. Under her leadership, Enough is Enough has led advocacy efforts to pass groundbreaking bipartisan federal laws, develop the Internet Safety 101 program, and an Emmy-winning PBS Internet Safety 101 TV series, and launched the national Safe Wi-Fi campaign that resulted in both McDonald's and Starbucks filtering illegal content on their public Wi-Fi. Donna graduated magna cum laude, Phi Beta Kappa from the University of South Carolina. She was last with us almost 2 years ago, and it's great to have her back with us again today. Donna Rice Hughes, welcome back to Next Steps Forward.
Thank you, Chris. I can't believe it's been 2 years.
You know, time flies. It's crazy. So a lot to catch up on. We were talking pre-show, so we'll get right into it. You know, I briefly touched on the mission of Enough is Enough, but I really obviously didn't do it justice. Would you first share its history and the story of its founding, and take a deeper dive into its mission and share how the mission has evolved over the years?
Thank you so much. You did a great job, by the way. I forgot
a good writer.
About my college stuff, so thanks for the good reminder. Anyhow, because it was a really long time ago. But Enough is Enough started in 1992. I was not a part of the organization then, and it was founded by women. And their focus at the time, this was pre-internet, was protecting children, women, and men from pornography and sexually oriented businesses and child pornography that was out in the culture, primarily through print and broadcast. When I started in 94, was just at the infancy of the internet. And someone showed us what was happening online pre-World Wide Web, pre-email, and that these were conversations happening with pedophiles. They were sharing child pornography of kids being abused as young as infants and toddlers. We were seeing hardcore pornographers putting up all kinds of illegal content then. This is 94. And I was a big fan of what I thought the internet could be. But we also knew in my 2 weeks there, I knew and understood that the criminals are always ahead of new technology. So that's how we got started in this space. It was my project. And by 1995, we had launched the Internet Safety Movement. We were working with both sides of Capitol Hill on the Senate side and the House side, got the first piece of legislation passed called the Communications Decency Act. And we'll probably talk about this a little bit later. And but that's how we started. And our focus then is what it is now. And that is we must prevent the online exploitation of children. And it's evolved over the years. You know, then our focus was child pornography, sexual predators, and also kids having access to all of this pornography online. And of course, it's evolved since then. But our focus is educating the public, primarily parents and others, and people like your audience, and then also working with the corporate America and the big tech companies to do the right thing. And then, of course, working with government to get the laws enforced and to get new policy and laws passed.
And we're going to talk about both big tech and the government shortly, because that's obviously the heart of it all here and the heart of your work. And a lot can happen, and obviously has happened over the past 2 years, and especially in the ever-changing, as you mentioned, digital world, and the efforts to help keep kids safe from the internet threats. What developments have been most significant or encouraging since you were last here in April of 2024? And which ones have been the most challenging and distressing to you?
Well, I would say what's been the most encouraging is that there are many, many organizations now focused on these efforts. The downside of that is because the dangers and the risk have grown. But the good news is that the hundreds of organizations that we work with, we're working together. so we have a collective voice, if you will, where we can actually influence legislation in a bigger way. We can get the word out. We can hold these big tech companies more accountable, because it's not just one group like Enough is Enough. It's all of us, all of our voices together. So I would say, to me, that's one of the most encouraging things. Discouraging, so many things. The online exploitation of children has escalated over the years. Just in the past 5 years, we're seeing reports of child pornography gone up higher than it's ever been. We're seeing new types of crimes like sextortion. AI has entered the mix, and it has just accelerated every type of danger online. So when you understand how the criminals and the bad guys use technology, then you can see, okay, every time there's a new platform, every time there's a new technology, there's going to be another way that the criminals and the evildoers who are seeking to exploit our children are going to be able to do that. And they're usually way ahead of us, way ahead of law enforcement, way ahead of laws, and certainly ahead of parents and kids themselves.
Well, to that point, a couple of things here. Did you ever think in 1994 technology would be where it is today in terms of what's available out there, how it's being used in this particular illegal realm? I mean, it's just unbelievable what's out there now and how it's being used. To your point, you mentioned sextortion now. And I remember seeing an article, I think it was in People magazine a few months ago, about this 16-year-old boy, 3-letter athlete, promising young college, about to go to college,
Yeah.
and committed suicide.
Yes. Yes. Well, you might be talking about Gavin Guffey. I'm not
Yes.
sure. So Gavin's father is a friend of mine. He's been on my podcast, Internet Safety with Donna Hughes. And Gavin is one of many young men, primarily, who have been sextorted. So this is really a new crime. And again, like I said, the bad guys are always looking for new ways to exploit children. They know that kids are online. I always say, where kids play, predators prey. So what is a sextortionist? Well, they are an extortionist, a financial extortionist, who actually, they go online, they look for boys primarily to friend, but they pose as cute girls, right? That they think that boy might like. It's really easy for a predator to do that, right? They just grab a picture, they grab a voice, and so this is what they do. And usually the sextortion happens very quickly. So I'll get to grooming a little bit later, but so they will present themselves as a girl. They may send nude pictures. They'll get the boy into a conversation. This can happen, or an online conversation through gaming platforms, through social media, etc. And then, as they're doing this sexual flirtation online, they'll eventually get the boy to send a nude image or a nude video. As soon as he does that, they try to extort him. They say if he doesn't pay a certain amount of money by a certain amount of time, that video, that picture is going to go viral. It's going to go to their parents. It's going to embarrass them. So this can happen very, very quickly. In Gavin's case, it was a matter of a few hours. He panicked and he killed himself. And his dad was at home and heard the shot. So this is not unusual, the pattern of how this happens. It's horrifying. And yet it's one of the fastest growing financial crimes in the world.
And it can happen to anybody.
It can happen to anyone. I always say, Chris, I'm so glad you said that. No child is immune. If your kid is online, that child is vulnerable. They are, not because they're not a good kid, not because you're not a good parent, but it's because the bad guys are much better. They're more clever, and they know how to trick these kids and to scare them, in the case of sextortion, to the point where they panic, or to groom them to continue to send more and more content and to continue to abuse them. And so it goes. And then in some instances to actually traffic them.
And another way, obviously, is gaming. That's a big thing for teenage boys. And my wife and I, our son will be 14 later this month.
Oh.
And luckily, we've got a group of parents where they're all playing basketball or whatever the baseball game is, MLB The Show, and so we can hear them whether on the TV. But they all know not to let somebody else in who's not in that group. And then also the parents will just sort of listen to see if they hear the names of the friends, talking like, "Hey, Jeremy, hey, Jack." And so just, parents keep an eye on it. It's something that's very simple. To your point, predators will come in and say, "Hey, I want to come and play your game." And my name's Joe. I'm 13 and I live in Ohio. But his name is not Joe and he's not 13. He doesn't live in Ohio.
Right.
So it's, again, it can happen to anyone, anywhere. Nobody's immune from it. And so I just want that to be very clear. That can happen in your front or backyard.
And in the privacy of your kid's room, which is one of the things we really caution about now, is to try to keep that technology out of the room. Chris, I love what you're doing with these other parents. That's so brilliant. A lot of parents don't realize when they set up that gaming device that it's completely open. So the parent has to go in and limit who the child can play with, which is what we recommend. But if you understand the technology out of the box, whether it's a smartphone, a tablet, a gaming device, it's completely open. That's the business model of the internet, which makes it very hard to cyber parent. It's one of the things we try to teach parents to do, and do exactly what you're doing with your son's online gaming. That is to close off that the contact with the outside world, so that they're only gaming with people that you and your wife approve of. Great job.
No, thank you. That's my wife's idea. We'll give her the credit for that.
Okay.
She's the boss. We all know that. But you talked about also, the bad guys, we'll call them, they're a step ahead in terms of law enforcement and legislation. You've been very active on the Hill in terms of policy. Again, we're going to do a deeper dive in that. But in some of the other work I've been doing in anti-human trafficking, it seems like politicians don't really want to talk about the legislation until or unless it becomes beneficial for them in an election year. Are you seeing that changing at all? Is this becoming more and more of a crisis, or is it just, when it suits them right for a photo op?
Well, I'll tell you, in the work of protecting kids online, I haven't necessarily seen that, particularly in the Senate. I have to give a big shout out for the members of the Senate on both sides of the aisle, the Republicans and the Democrats. They've worked very closely together. All the legislation that they are proposing and have proposed for many years has been bipartisan. May have a Republican and a Senate co-sponsor, and then they typically, if it's Judiciary or the Commerce Committee, it comes out as a unanimous pass it out of committee. Problem's been getting it to a vote for the Senate, and then the House has been another whole thing. So, but to your point, is it a crisis? Yes. One of the things that I think is impacting legislators is that they're hearing from voices. They're hearing from kids themselves who have been damaged. They're hearing from parents who have lost a child. And we've even seen this in Senate hearings. And now we're seeing this in these trials that are going on. There's a couple around the country where plaintiffs have actually been suing big tech companies. Plaintiffs are people who have been harmed, or their children have been harmed. So these kinds of voices are really elevating the issue. And it is, holding our government to a higher level of accountability themselves to get laws passed.
Well, it's good to hear that, as divisive as our government is right now and as polarized it is, that they're actually unified on this. And so, we all know that our children are the future. And so I'm thrilled to hear that in this particular case. And as a follow-up to your comments there in terms of big tech, we know the technology companies and the online exploitation of children by the users of that technology are obviously very closely linked. But let's take these issues separately. For the years, the stereotype of sexploitation victim is a runaway or homeless teenage girl from a troubled or abusive home, already involved in risk behavior and often preyed upon by an older adult predator in person. What's the reality of child exploitation? And we talked before, are boys as much at risk as girls?
I would say boys are at risk. I don't know if they're at as much risk. I mean, I haven't seen the data on that, and it really depends on what risk you're talking about. So for instance, with using and becoming a consumer of pornography, and I'm talking hardcore pornography, most of the pornography that's out there now is not protected speech under the First Amendment, even for children or even for adults. It's illegal. But boys have a tendency to get hooked on that sooner, but so are girls too. So it's just a little less with girls when it comes to pornography than boys. In terms of trafficking, boys are vulnerable. It really depends, and same thing with sexual exploitation. So it's about supply and demand. So if you have, predators and traffickers who prefer a boy, that's the demand. So those boys are going to be trafficked, or those teenage boys are going to be trafficked. Same thing with girls. So they're all vulnerable. And the other thing that has changed so much with technology is that the internet, for instance, with trafficking, is the main tool that traffickers use to recruit kids, to groom them, and then to put them out to the johns, so to speak, and also to market them. And then there's a cycle of abuse, Chris. So what does that mean? Well, when a child is either trafficked or they're sexually abused, it doesn't have to be trafficking. Trafficking is when it becomes commercial. That child is sold commercially. Abuse, child sexual abuse, they don't have to be sold commercially. All right. And the child pornography has just escalated tremendously because of this technology. So this is creating a demand for more victims. So when someone who it becomes aroused by this type of content, that often is not enough. So they're going to want to act out against a real child. So then a child is abused. When that child is abused, whether they're trafficked or abused by a predator, in somebody's home, pictures are taken, videos are taken, then it's uploaded again, and it just creates this cycle. Same thing with pornography.
You've talked about how technology and exploitation has changed over the last 5 to 10 years. How is enough adapting its strategies to address these emerging threats like AI-generated exploitation or encrypted platforms?
Well, that's a loaded question. I can tell you with AI, there are not many AI experts. We are all trying to figure this out at the same time. Government is trying to figure this out. The White House has even asked for a national AI standard. And we're going, well, what does that look like? Senator Marsha Blackburn has proposed some legislation. She's on Commerce and Judiciary. So we'll see if that goes through. But there's also not even consensus on that. But I will say okay, what are we doing at Enough is Enough? We're using our platforms, and like even talking to you, Chris, and your audience, to say to parents, AI can be very dangerous. And these AI companies have not put the guardrails, the safety measures around their technology, and therefore kids are vulnerable. Case in point, a chat companion. So you might say, what's a chat companion? Well, that's like a Grok or a Chat GPT, right? Now, in and of themselves, they should be helpful. They can help with homework and everything else. But because the guardrails aren't there have been many, many cases of these chat companions actually mirroring these kids' behaviors, where 1 in 3 kids now prefer an AI chat companion, which is just a technology bot, over a real life relationship. That's very scary. And in some instances, there have been one case actually with Adam Raines. His parents sued ChatGPT's parent company because the chat companion actually, they said, coached Adam into committing suicide. When Adam said he wanted to tell his parents he was thinking about hanging himself, the bot said, no, you can talk to me about it. So anyway, he did end up killing himself. So, but that's not just AI. Most of these companies do not have the safety measures in place. So AI is just another generation of these companies not doing the right thing, not developing their technology with safety in mind. I mean, just go back to cars and seatbelts, right? I mean, we can't fathom getting a car with no seatbelt, with no kind of protection measures in there, because that's been the law of the land. So what we want to see happen federally is for these technology companies that really allow so much criminal behavior to happen on their platforms to have those safeguards put in place from the get-go. We call it safety by design, or default filtering, default safety. I call it flip the switch. All they got to do is flip the switch to put the safety measures on rather than off, which is where they are right now.
Earlier we're talking about parents talking to their kids. The teenage years are difficult. As a parent, there's a joke I like to tell where my neighbor tells about his friend. When his daughter turned 13, he gave her a big hug and kissed her on the head and said, honey, I love you. And, you're going to go away for a while, but, the Martians are going to take you. But when you come back, I'm going to be right here and I'll love you just as much. That type of thing.
Yeah.
So it's hard to get their trust, hard to communicate with them. But, in today's world, especially with tech, we've got these mini computers in our hands.
Right.
What are some questions parents should be asking their kids, or what should they be looking out for?
Well, first of all, let's go back to technology in hand. I want to encourage parents of young children to consider delaying tech as soon as possible. The numbers are astronomical about how many kids 2 year olds and up have a tablet. They don't need to have a tablet. And if they have something, even if it's not internet connected, and it should never be internet connected, I don't suggest internet connection unless they're in school. When they have to be in school and they have to have an internet connection, then you've got to have all the safety measures turned on. But tablets and smartphones, wait until hopefully they're in the 8th grade. Now we can talk about safe phones. There are lots of options besides giving your kid a tablet or a phone. But even if it's not internet connected, there's an issue with screen time. Now, if you've ever seen a kid throw a fit when they're watching something online, even if it's not online, sorry, if they're just watching something on their tablet, you take that tablet away, it's highly addictive because of the way the screens move and the interest and everything else. Give them an old-fashioned book or let them watch Mr. Rogers, all right? Because the way that programming is designed, it's not designed to addict. Okay, so even a screen not internet connected is problematic. So I say delay as soon as possible. So go back to your question, Chris. You said what?
No, that's fine.
On you there, but
that's fine because we're just having a conversation. Yeah. So I want to highlight you talked about, with the phone and waiting. There's a big campaign of wait until 8. Yes. Wait until 8th grade.
Yes.
But what I was saying is, what are some questions the parents should be asking?
Well, it really just depends. The first thing is to ask themselves, is my child mature enough to have an internet connected device? And if so, when? And get those rules established among the parents early on. Then when you introduce technology, teach them that this device is not a toy. It's a tool. All right. So it's not a toy. So if you can start to get that into their mind. And of course, anytime you introduce technology, you've got to be prepared, particularly if it's internet connected, to talk about the dangers. So if you've got a kid connected to a tablet and in the 7th grade, they're connected to the internet, are you prepared to have the pornography conversation? Because you need to be, because they're most likely going to come across it. Now, we're going to teach you how to make sure or try to prevent that from happening, but it doesn't mean it's not going to happen, right? Because other kids have their technology and they can see all these kinds of things. So I would just, again, go back to delay tech. But then once they have internet connected technology, you need to have regular conversations with them about what they're doing online. If they're online every day, then have a conversation every day. Not what were you doing, who were you talking to, but keep the conversation open, because you want your child to trust you when and if they come across something problematic. If somebody approaches them, that they can trust you not to shame them, and that you can have open conversations with your child so that they're part of understanding your concern and the parameters that you put around the technology.
And I just want to highlight that because trust is the biggest thing here, especially in those 13 years, 14, 15 years old, because I know a couple of parents where they would go into their kids' phones at night when they didn't know about it, just to see what they were looking at. And then the kids found out about it and just everything blew up from that. And so it's their privacy, it's their right. But at the same time, as a parent, you have the right to know what's going on, especially when they're a minor and you're paying for the phone. But that trust factor, I think, is just the biggest thing in any case as a parent and a child, but certainly when it comes to something like this, to your point, with knowing the endless and limitless amounts of pornography and things like that are out there today.
And sexual predators. And let me say something about the monitoring. We recommend a lot of tools for parents. So if it's a tablet, if it's the computer, if it's the gaming device, we recommend that you turn on filters that will help prevent all of the negative types of content, including pornography, but gaming, racist content, anything you want to block, you can. And it's age appropriate. You can decide if it's strict settings or not strict settings. Monitoring technology, this is really important. And I recommend, with all the tools I'm going to talk to you about, that you let your kids know you're turning it on. Not because you're spying on them, So get away from this idea of spyware or anything else. It's not that. It's because you want to make sure that people that could harm them are not getting to them, and that the kid themselves is not putting themselves in harm's way, because kids are very trusting. And that's the way they're designed to be, innocent until a certain age. So if you can help them understand, I'm doing this to protect you and to help build some boundaries around your use of technology, so then they don't feel like you're spying. And they can even look at what's going on, right? And then put the time controls on. Again, this goes back to, this is a tool, not a toy idea. And if you start with that, and then as you're gradually introduced into the internet, you're gradually, then you're turning on the tools, like those three main ones: filtering, monitoring, and time controls. And I recommend blocking social media until they're at least 13 or 14. They don't have access to any of that stuff. You can do it. It's a pain. We've got tools to show you how to do that, but it's really, really important, because again, the business model is everything's open as soon as you connect to the internet. It's just the way it works.
And where can people find you to find those tools?
Yes, well, we have two websites. InternetSafety101.org is the site that is devoted to educating parents, teachers, grandparents on all the dangers, warning signs, red flags. We've got everything divided between, over here's sexual sex trafficking, there's pornography, there's cyberbullying, and then you can go and say, what are the warning signs? What are some conversation starters? What do I need to do to protect my kids from that? You can download free guides. We have links to all the tools, so you know how to turn them on each and every platform. So, and the other thing I would just recommend, if you go there, please sign up for our free weekly news blast. We're keeping you updated all the time, because as it is, I can hardly keep up, and I'm an expert, okay? And so I'm going to try to help you, and my team's going to try to help you stay updated, so you don't have to figure it out all on your own.
We've been talking to Donna Rice Hughes about preventing the online exploitation of children. We'll be right back after a short break. Please stay with us. And we are back. I'm Chris Meek, host of Next Steps Forward. And my guest today is Donna Rice Hughes. Donna has 30 years of leadership as a social entrepreneur, internet safety expert, author, speaker, commentator, and producer. She's the president and CEO of Enough is Enough, a nonpartisan organization that has led the fight to make the internet safer for children and families since 1994. Donna, we've been talking about a lot of stuff, and as always is the case, I'm way behind in my notes and my Q&A. But some of the things we were talking about earlier that I really want to dive into now is big tech and their involvement. There are two big legal cases right now, one in New Mexico with the Attorney General's office against Meta, and a Los Angeles trial accusing Meta and Google-owned YouTube of fueling social media addiction in young users. What are the facts in those cases, and what would you and Enough is Enough hope to see come from them?
Yeah, they're two different types of cases, as you said. The one in California is ongoing right now. It was Google and Meta were the only two big tech companies that didn't settle out of court. So there were other companies that were sued. There was a whole over 1,000 plaintiffs that claimed harm, and so hence the lawsuit. And honestly, from a PR perspective, Chris, I have no idea why Google and Meta did not settle, because they are getting very well-deserved negative press. So for us, for those in the battle that are trying to raise the visibility of these issues, it's good because we're actually seeing these companies exposed. And this is something that doesn't necessarily happen when you have a hearing on Capitol Hill, like a Senate hearing. These companies are deposed. They have to disclose this information. So we're finding out all this information that we knew, but we couldn't necessarily prove. Now, I'm going to just put my glasses on. Meta, for instance, it was disclosed that 500,000 kids a day on Instagram were being targeted. That's 500,000 kids a day on Instagram were being targeted. They knew this, all right? In New Mexico, this was more of a child pornography case, and they found that Meta did not disclose that there were 7.5 million images and videos of child pornography. We call it CSAM now. And they were not going to disclose it until it got it all encrypted, right? So this is so evil just on its face. Why? Because these are mostly real kids in this content that could have possibly been rescued. That content could have been, taken down because law enforcement would have had it. They sat on it. 7.5 million images and videos of kids being tortured and raped and abused. So that's just one thing that, it's just, what do we hope to get from this? Well, first of all, we know that these companies, they pay attention to their profits. One of the big issues we've had with them is they're putting profits over safety. Well, so now, hopefully we're going to see big enough settlements to where they go, you know what? It's just not worth it. It's going to be better off for us as a company, for our shareholders and everyone else, if we prioritize safety, because then they have a win-win. Now, we've been saying that all along, but you got to hit them where it hurts. And that's what's happening with these lawsuits.
And so you think this could be a turning point for accountability for big tech?
Yeah, I do. I think this, along with legislation, because one lawsuit or two lawsuits and a few settlements isn't going to change anything, right? It's like you find that some oil tanker dumps oil in the Gulf of Mexico. Well, fine, you clean it up. It costs them billions of dollars, but you have to have a law to prevent that from happening. See, so that's the way I would look at all that's going on. We still need to get these laws passed. There's some very good bills right now before the Senate. There's not going to be one silver bullet bill. There are just too many dangers or too many issues. So there's very narrowly tailored bill to deal with CSAM, to deal with, if someone is harmed because there's been child pornography taken of them. Now they can file a civil suit. If the deep fakes bill actually gets passed. It hasn't been passed yet. So there was another piece of legislation that was passed last year, and it was called Take It Down. So now they have to take that content down, but there's no civil option for someone to sue that company for harm. And if this other law gets passed, there will be.
It's amazing how far Zuckerberg has fallen from king of the hill and the cool guy in his hoodie sitting next to President Obama to now having to testify in front of Congress and turn around and apologize to the parents of victims. And I hope he gets more.
Well, I do too. And I was in the room when that happened. And I was sitting right behind the parents holding up signs of
Mm-hmm.
their children. And I think it was Senator Josh Hawley. He didn't ask him to turn around and apologize. He
He
told him
told
to
him. Yep.
turn around and apologize.
Yep.
What do you have to? You could hear a pin drop. I was like, oh my gosh, and you could just see
Yep.
Zuckerberg and
Yep.
everybody. We were like, what's he going to say? What's he going to say? He did the right thing. He did make an apology. I don't know
Yeah.
how sincere it was because nothing's really changed in a
Right.
big way. I mean, but we see little minor changes when these kinds of things happen, right? But not the sweeping changes that we really need to see to what I call flip the switch to really turn that paradigm so that this technology is working more like broadcast television.
Mm-hmm.
There's just certain things you can't say and do on broadcast television because they're laws. All right. And if you do, you're going to get fined because there are regulatory agencies that oversee that. We don't have that right now with the internet, which is why it's incumbent on parents to be the first line of defense.
So let's dig into that a little bit deeper. You talked about a few different bills, excuse me, that are out there. Congress has been debating several major child safety bills. One of them is called the Kids Online Safety Act.
Mm-hmm.
What does that law do, and will it be enough if Congress does pass it?
Well, the Kids Online Safety Act is a bipartisan piece of legislation. It's fully supported by everyone on Judiciary and Commerce. It's been passed out of those committees the past 3 years, or the past, I think it's 2 or 3 years. I'm not sure where we are this year right now. That's another whole thing. But it didn't get to the floor for a vote. So the Kids Online Safety Act is really designed for these social media and gaming platforms because they act the same way. All right. To have a duty of care, to what we call building that safety formulas into the technology themselves, to have the strictest settings turned on, the controls, and have reporting mechanisms and all these kinds of things. So it's really good. We like it a lot. The Senate version we particularly like. The House introduced another version that I call K Street COSA because it really takes out the protections that the Senate version has in, and we don't think it's not very good. So we hope that the Senate version does get passed, and it goes over to the House and gets passed and signed into law. It's not going to solve the problem on social media and gaming platforms, but it's a really good chunk of a step in getting there. And when you look at other countries, it's not anywhere near what Indonesia just did, Australia just did, where they just said kids under 16 are banned. Well, they can do that. They don't have the multi-$100 million big tech lobbies operating in those countries like we do here. And we're seeing those very same companies complying within 24 to 48 hours. They're just kicking all the kids off under 16. They can do it. They say they can't, but they can, and they've done it overseas.
I remember seeing that about Australia a few months ago. And I'm curious, you just talked about the House bill being a bit lighter than the Senate bill.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on that? Is it because maybe some members of Congress have big supporters from some of these companies? Or, I mean, these are kids we're talking about. Why wouldn't they want the strictest?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I wish I had the answer to that. I don't, because those same companies are lobbying the Senate too. I think with the Senate is a much smaller governing body, and they've been so proactive themselves, all the leaders. And so I think it's a lot harder, for anyone to go stray off of,
Sure.
basically being bought off by big tech. I think it's a little easier. I am not saying that that's what's happening in the
Yep.
House, but there is very watered down, not just that, but other pieces of legislation that they just had a hearing on last week. We didn't like it, and it's not going to fly in the Senate. I know that because I've talked to senators. So they're going to have to duke it out in committee, as they will, and the Senate will win, and kids will win as a result.
And what committee is this?
Well, in the reconciliation of whichever bill we're talking about. So the bills go to reconciliation. Nothing's passed yet, first
Yep.
of all, the House or the Senate. So this is all just hypothetical. But let's just say that the House version of COSA gets passed and the Senate version of COSA gets passed. They're going to be different. unless they work it out in the House ahead of time. Then they'll go into their committees and they'll work it out in committee.
I just want to encourage our viewers and listeners to go and write and call their members of Congress to encourage them and look the other way if somebody in big tech wants to support their candidacy. Another piece of legislation is the Communications Decency Act that you'd like to see amended, and they call that the CDA. What does the CDA Section 230 do, and why do you want to see its repeal? And was it always a bad piece of legislation, or is it just the evolution of the internet has changed its purpose and impact?
Well, it's a good question. First of all, the Communications Decency Act itself was the law. I worked on that piece of legislation, got it passed. It's a great law. So it's not the law, Communications Decency Act. It's a section of the Communications Decency Act called Section 230. And what that was designed to do back in 96 when we got it passed, when I say we, I was there, I was at the drafting table, that all that did was give companies like AOL a protection if they had their filters turned on to protect kids from pornography, which was what this was all about back then, and some pornography got through a filter to a kid, that they would not be liable for that. They would have what we call a Good Samaritan immunity. Well, that was the intent of Congress and those of us who actually supported that, as did I. But fast forward, the courts misinterpreted that. Big tech companies found, hey, maybe we can use that to shield us from immunity for having child pornography on our platforms that we haven't even tried to take down, that we haven't tried to protect. And so they were winning these cases. So now the precedent in the land is, in the United States of America, is that these companies have been able to use 230 to give them basically unlimited immunity. And that was never the case. So that's why it needs to be fixed.
So you're using it just for air cover.
Yeah, just use it. And they've won. They've been able to do that. In fact, there's a case right now going to the Supreme Court with Twitter. Twitter, when it was Twitter, not X, not that it really matters, but there was a case brought of a young boy who was trafficked. His images of him, which would be child pornography, were on there. Twitter was notified, and they refused to take it down after they were notified. Now this is just, they said, well, it doesn't, conflict with our terms of use policy, and we don't have to take it down. They didn't take it down. So now that case is going to the Supreme Court. So it's just been an abused part of a law that should have never happened. And you asked me a question early on, what's changed? None of us that helped craft the Communications Decency Act and this Good Samaritan Defense Code 230 could have ever foreseen that the courts, the federal courts of the land, and these big tech companies would abuse that to give them free reign to do whatever they want, even allowing child sex abuse to sit on their platforms and refusing to take it down.
That's shocking.
Mm-hmm.
Another piece of legislation you've referenced a few times is the Stop CSAM Act, which would allow victims of online child exploitation to sue platforms that knowingly host abuse material. Why is that proposal important, and how likely is it to pass?
I think it's very likely to pass because it's really the add-on to the Take It Down Act, which was signed into law last year. I happened to be in the Rose Garden when that was signed. And so, but that law did not go far enough. It was a good step one. This is step two. Okay, they have to take it down if there's what we call non-consensual content. It's not just CSAM, it's any type of content. So if somebody took a picture of your son, or, well, no, your son is a minor, of me, I'm definitely not a minor child, and it's up there, it's on somebody's platform, and it's sexual content, they have to take it down if I notify them. Right, that's what Take It Down does. Now, the Stop CSAM is, if it's CSAM, then these victims, survivors, can actually sue to get, to basically sue these companies for having it up there and not taking it down.
We need more and more laws out there like this. I don't know why. You mentioned a few minutes ago something's 2 or 3 years going back and forth. Why? I just don't understand why it takes that long.
Well,
process.
One thing, we've got a change in leadership in the Senate, even though this is bipartisan. For some reason, Senator Schumer was not bringing these laws to the floor, even those that had strong Democrat sponsors on them. I don't know why, but there's also a huge lobby. There's at least two PACs, super PACs, that the big tech companies have put together, hundreds of millions of dollars in money just to fight these laws, just fight this legislation. And if that's not bad enough, you've got AI companies that are doing the same thing. And they actually are working with the White House, unfortunately, to say we don't want guardrails around AI, and trying to get moratoriums on these AI companies, which we think is a really bad idea. AI is here and it's off and running, right? So they don't need a moratorium. We need to have those state attorneys general be able to prosecute any of these companies if they're breaking the law in their state. Now, do we want a uniform AI policy? Yes, that's a good idea. And what do the guardrails look like? That's a good idea, but that hasn't happened yet. Senator Blackburn, I've talked to her. She's talking to President Trump. That she's got something proposed, but it hasn't even gone to a vote yet. On the Senate. So meanwhile, AI is just going, going, and there's AI chatbots and toys. We put AI toys on Enough is Enough's naughty and nice list for Christmas. Like, they've got chat companions in there. They're building a relationship with your kid, and they're taking data from your home. All right, they're little mini spies. So we've got to put those guardrails around all this technology.
We were talking earlier about sextortion and one particular young man. What are some warning signs that a child or a teenager might be caught in a sextortion scheme? And if a young person realizes they are being blackmailed online, what are the most important things that they and their parents should do immediately?
Well, I would say this goes back to have those ongoing conversations with your child. When you hear about these kinds of things like you're hearing right now, and you've got, a son or a daughter that's already online, talk to them about this now before it happens. Just say, this is a growing crime. I know you probably don't think this could ever happen to you. Share the stories of this happening to kids their age, not just sextortion, but being groomed, being trafficked, getting hooked on pornography. Have those conversations, because they're probably seeing and hearing about this anyway, and say, now, if anything like this ever happens to you, I don't want you to panic. Take a deep breath and come to me, and we're going to work it out together. So lay that groundwork, lay that foundation in the beginning. But what's a red flag now? I mean, anytime you see a child start to panic, they change their behavior abruptly. They start hiding things. Maybe they're taking money in the case of a sextortion case or whatever. Just notice those behavior changes, and just say, hey, whatever's happening, we need to talk. And if you've got those tools in place I told you about, the filtering and the monitoring, you can check and you say, hey, you should do this anyway. So I'm going to be doing weekly checks on the monitoring device and everything else, because I want to make sure that somebody is not snookering you. They're not fooling you. They might be able to get by you, but they're not going to get by me in the monitor.
We've got about 2 or 3 minutes left. I can't believe how quickly time goes when I speak with you. Again, where can people find you and learn more about Enough is Enough?
Yes, we have 2 websites. The easiest one to remember is enough.org. But if you go to internetsafety101.org, you will find all those free guides, all that free information. Please go there. I'm just going to show you something real quick. We put these guides together. I call them interactive guides. This one's on gaming. So we put all the very well-known gaming platforms up. This is on our website. We come here and we look at what are all the safety measures and the policies and everything else. And if you're trying to figure out, how do I use these things, we've got links to all the tutorials. And if you see red marks, that means they don't have a tool or they don't have a policy to protect your kid. So this is a good little cheat sheet. We did one of these for social media sites. We did one for AI companions, and also one for safe phones. So there are many phones on the market that are not internet connected. So you can go on internetsafety101.org, or the other site, enough.org, and you can find those guides. Download them, learn them. It's hard to be a cyber parent, but we're here to help.
Those are amazing guides. For those of you who are just listening, I highly recommend you go to the website and also look at the video on YouTube, because she showed them up and it looks like it's cliff notes for how to figure out the gaming system and turn those features on. So thank you to you and your team for putting that all together. So I really appreciate that. And Don, I want to thank you and your team for all of the work that you do. This is a heavy issue. It's one that's necessary and needed, unfortunately. I know it's not easy to deal with some of the things that you're seeing. And so again, a heartfelt thanks to you and your team for all the work that you do. So thank you.
Thanks, Chris. It's great to be with you. Thanks for having me on.
No, I appreciate your time and great to see you. I'm Chris Meek. We're at a time. We'll see you next week, same time, same place. Until then, stay safe and keep taking your next